All right. Thanks for coming, either if you're here in person or virtually. We're starting in the Rose Garden, which is lovely and in bloom. And if you are here in person, it smells wonderful. This is technically not a plant on our 10 plant tour, but we have some micro miniature roses down here. And those will not spread like a true ground cover, but those would make a nice, lovely like hedge or ground cover if you have a place that will that you need something, a ground cover like that. And this is about as tall as they get, and there's all different varieties. This white one is Cinderella. And has been around since 1953. These micro miniature roses have been around for a long time. And we're going to work our way around to about the blueberry bush, I believe, right now. So let's head that way. And you can see lots of things are in bloom. The Arboretum is great to visit right now. So right here we have lamb's ear. And so lamb's ear will spread rapidly. And it's great to use as a ground cover. One fact that I did not know is that it can actually be used to cover wounds. It has some sort of antibiotic property, okay? It can get a little tall, about 1.5 feet tall, but it does spread rather rapidly. And when you plant them about a foot apart to give yourself some space. And once it's established, it's pretty drought tolerant. But in that first year when you plant them, they will need to be watered pretty frequently. They are non-native, typically from the Middle East. Armenia, Turkey, Iran is where they originated. And in the springtime when they flower, those flowers are pretty small and purple. So right here, dianthus, better known as carnations. So there's many hundreds of different varieties of carnations, okay? So this one makes a nice ground cover. It will spread, but typically around here in North Carolina, not always the best plant to plant in full sun because we get so hot. So partial shade around here, but they will thrive and they will spread. So there's two varieties here. The other variety is not blooming right now. Much thanks to Sarah for all of her information. The red one is Dianthus carophyllus Chris's Passalong, and that came from the Ralston Arboretum. So you will also see this plant at the H.D. Cooley Library. And just sort of for a reference, at the library, it bloomed all winter. Just because it was so shaded and so protected, okay? So it just very much depends upon the conditions, okay? The flowers in a lot of the varieties of carnations are edible. And it's the petals, the sepals are actually very bitter. So bakers a lot of times will actually crystallize, put them in sugar and use them as decorations on cakes. So that is where sometimes you'll see the dianthus petals as decorations. There's a program done by Nashville Parks and Rec where we put them in ice cubes and use them as a punch ice cube. So that was something that we had done. They've also been used to treat like coronary afflictions and fevers. They made them into a tonic. Japanese plum yew And this cultivar is prostrata, which is a very, very slow growing version. Okay, so this can get up to 3 feet tall, but it's great if you have an area that's got a lot of trees and you want to plant something to sort of stop all the undergrowth. I did read that this will produce an edible fruit similar to a plum, and that's how it gets its name. Because this one is slow growing, I'm not entirely sure if it will produce that fruit. I couldn't find that out. There's also a cultivar called Duke or Duke Gardens that was cultivated at Duke. This is very deer resistant, so deer will not like this one. So if you're looking for something that the deer like to stay away from, try this one. But yew is an evergreen, a gymnosperm, so similar to pine trees, things like that. Okay. Any questions? Did I skip anything? Anyone want to know anything? All right.
How long has that one been out?
I do not know. Does anyone know how long this one has been here?
Probably since the beginning, I would think.
All right. I was like,
It's been there a long time. It's also an upright version.
no, this, yeah, it's, so, yeah. So hostas, and there's all sorts of hostas, but these are really cool. This is called curly fry hosta, and so they get their name very, very obviously from their leaves. And I just happened, when I was like, oh, what plants am I going to include? I came up with a list of, I don't know, many plants to include. And I just happened to walk by this one and see it. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. But these get about 6 inches tall. The leaves are just sort of a neat green color. Chartreuse is the color that's used to describe it. And then they'll get a purple flower. You know how hostas throw up their slender stalk with the flowers on it, like that. And they get about 4 to 6 inches tall. They'll spread, of course. They are, of course, not deer resistant. Deer love hostas. And I did read that they are susceptible to Hosta X virus, which I had not heard of. Hostas are toxic to cats and dogs, but edible for humans. Yeah, I did not know that. Apparently in Japan, they fry them in tempura batter, and it's called, hold on, I wrote it down, urei. Urei. And it's the younger leaves that are really the most edible and most tasty. But you can see all sorts of hosta varieties around here. So some are shorter, some are larger, but I thought this was very, very an original. I liked it a lot. So this is golden creeping jenny, sometimes called moneywort. All right, and it gets its name moneywort from this Latin name. I gotta look at it. Numularia. All right, and that is Latin. I forgot to write that down for, I think, money. I think that's what. But that's where it gets moneywort from, okay? So this will grow very aggressively in the right conditions where it's wet, but if it's hot and dry, it grows a little less aggressively. If you are planting this, you need to be careful because it is considered invasive in those hot, dry conditions, okay? Because it does self-seed. So it produces a flower and then will seed, and then it will also, if you take this and drop it somewhere, it will root at the node, which is where the leaves attach to the stem. So it will root right there at the node where the leaf attaches to the stem. So you have to be super careful. We don't want this growing everywhere. Another plant that is very similar to that, invasive, is English ivy. So you have to be careful with the plants that you are growing. I personally love this plant. I think it's beautiful. But you just have to be aware of what you're planting. All right, so this is great as a ground cover. You can see it's a full mat, okay? All right, so this is stone crop. So very, very drought tolerant, okay? And you can see that there are some that are a little bit taller than others. And it gets about 6 inches tall at the absolute tallest. Again, another little like bright, like greenish plant. It is super drought tolerant. And it's actually tolerant to lots of different things. Air pollution, deer, drought. So if you are a person who is like, I can't grow anything, start with something like this. You could put this down and start it as your ground cover and then go on from there. And I'm not sure how fast it spreads, and this is a relatively slow grower, right?
I think to say that.
So,
But I mean, it does like to do in the past.
yeah, so this will,
Kind of keep an eye on it.
yep. So, this is the like yellowish variety. There's lots of different stone crops. Okay, we're gonna move right over here. This is called green and gold, which I couldn't even, like, when I was like, oh, that's a weird name for a plant, green and gold, but that is its actual common name. And this likes full sun, but again, we're in an area that gets a lot of full sun. To make it grow the best that you can, you're going to want to remove the spent stems. So this plant will do okay in this area, but it's blooming right now. And then because we get so much sun, it will then bloom again in the fall usually. So it'll bloom in the spring, and then in the fall, in areas where there's not so much intense sunlight, it will probably bloom throughout the summer, okay? And this is about as tall as it gets, and it'll spread a little bit more typically, okay? So when you're looking for ground cover, you have to see how much the plant typically spreads, and then, plant your plants according to that, because even ground covers don't spread usually out of control. The plant will reach its growth potential. Okay, but this is a beautiful plant as well. So this usually gets about 2 feet wide. So it's got a little bit farther to go. All right, I think that's it for the plants I had planned here. Any questions? No? All right, we're gonna go to the pollinator garden. No, we're in the pollinator garden. We're gonna go to the Patriot garden. Find your way out. Don't step on any of Anne's plants. So liriope, liriope is actually the scientific name, or lily turf, okay? This variegated right here. And this is evergreen, and it will spread, and you see it everywhere. Everywhere. There's more throughout. And there's actually, if you go to the NC Plant Toolbox, they actually have a video on it as well. So full sun, but it also is pretty versatile because it can tolerate shade. It just won't do as well. And then it'll flower later in the summer, and those flowers will turn into black berries, and then the berries will fall off before the winter. So the name comes from a Roman nymph, and then that nymph gave birth to Narcissus, which is our daffodils, the name of our daffodils. So yeah, I thought that was really interesting. Also interesting is that this plant is in the asparagus family. So I thought that was super interesting. I really love liriope. You can pretty much do anything that you want. It is in the Nashville Elementary School garden, and the kids trample it, as kids do, and it survives. It doesn't get, if there's a drought, it doesn't get watered as often as it should, and it still does wonderful. So it is really versatile. They say that you can even plant this in your, as a yard, as a grass, as long as your grass doesn't get a whole lot of traffic, and it'll still be all right. I imagine it wouldn't flower, but I mean, it's a pretty grass. It's not a true grass, but it looks like a grass. So I really like this. We're going to move our way. So these are the dwarf crested iris right here. These little ones. These are spiderworts. They were flowering just on Saturday. But that's the last plant I have planned on there. But dwarf crested iris, they're really very beautiful. And they are native. You can actually find them out in the wild, okay? And so really early bloomer, like typical irises, okay? And the max height is about 9 inches. They're heat tolerant, but they can take sun or shade. Typically like sun a little bit better though. They are pollinator friendly, and just like most irises, they are a little bit toxic. And you can see how these have made a lovely, lovely mat and ground cover for here in the Patriot Garden. So I don't know, any questions? That's really all. Oh. Yeah, I really wish these were blooming because they are like, it reminds me a little bit of a trillium, like a triple petal. They're purple and with a little bit of yellow in them. You've got the picture so you can see how pretty they are.